Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, kushalmehra. It's the timing is different today. We're starting in the morning, so good morning to everyone. So today's discussion is about, as they say, what was 1992 when an advisor to, I think it was Clinton, when he had said, "It's the economy, stupid." And it's always the economy. We should always remember it's always about the economy. So we had our first phase of the fiscal stimulus announcements. That was on the 27th of March when the Honorable Finance Minister of India, Nirmala Sitharamanji, had announced the 1,70,000 crore package. So since then, I think it's now 22 days and we await for the next set of measures. Yes, we have had a few measures announced by the finance ministry in the form of refunds, and we've had some reverse repo rate reductions and the repo rate reductions. Having said that, we still await for a detailed fiscal package. So having said that, I'm very happy today that I have with me two people who I would love to hear more about this than you may want me to speak about it. So welcome to the podcast, Mr. Pai and Anuraag.
Thank you, Kushal. Thank you.
So I want to start with Mr. Pai. Mr. Pai, I just recently on the 15th of April, you had written an article on the direct benefit transfers 2.0 in Swarajya. It was a very detailed, long form article, and I actually loved reading it because you suggested, if I were to use the words, it is a fundamental change in our outlook of the direct benefit transfers. So could I would request you to actually explain it to the listeners and the viewers of this podcast in detail.
Kushal, let me start by telling people what Prime Minister Modi has done in his first term. I think most people don't understand the important things that he has done and the impact he's had on this country. First of all, 375 million Indians have opened bank accounts. 1.2 billion Indians, almost everybody who is a major or above the age of 10 maybe, has an Aadhaar account. Through this, he has been transferring money through DBT to people for about 450 schemes. About 9,75,000 crores has been transferred in the last 6 years. Now, why is a direct benefit transfer important as against the existing system of government giving subsidies, etc.? First of all, let us understand what is poverty. Poverty in the simplest terms can be defined as a lack of purchasing power. Now, I have purchasing power because I got a skill. I got purchasing power because I got education. I got purchasing power because I got some assets which give me revenue or some returns. And then I got money to spend, and I spend the money on the things I want to buy. Now, if you're a semi-skilled or a low-skilled person without an education, staying in an urban area, rural area, you don't have the purchasing power to keep your body and soul together in a modern day economy, because you'll not get more money for working. And that too, because you're unskilled or semi-skilled. And there's a lot of people in this country, because the bad policies made by Pandit Nehru in the first 10 years of independence, many people are unskilled. Our literacy is only about 75%. Let's remember. And we're still a poor country despite a $3 trillion economy with a per capita income of $2,000. Now, what did the subsidy regime do earlier? What the subsidy regime said was, all designed by leftist economists, they said, look, we will create a ration for you, a ration scheme for you, where we'll give you a ration card. You go to a shop and you can pick up rations by paying a small amount of money. So they go to farmers, they buy all the grains, store it, and they supply. Now, what is the problem? The problem is I may not get good grain. The problem is the shop may not be open. The problem is many people have fake ration cards. Well, Modi has done away with most of it, but that still exists. I'm at the mercy of the shopkeeper. And then they say, I'll give you some interest subsidy for your loan. I have to go to a bank, I have to plead, and I have to beg. Then they say, I'll give you free education, go to a government school. Now, we know that government has got a lot of schools running. 60% of Indians go to government schools, but government does not control whether the teacher comes, what is the output, what is the quality, etc. You are the mercy of somebody there who may come, who may not come, and you don't know, and the education is indifferent. And many Indians want to learn English as a language. You don't teach you English till class 5, class 6, because some Buddhijivis in the state say you should not learn English. Their children go to English school. They say you should not learn English. I'm all for the mother tongue, but you should learn English as a language, and they want to do that. So everything that the government gives to them is done through intermediaries, is done through layers where people don't have a choice. The democracy has two components, very important components. Freedom of choice to decide what to do and what not to do. Freedom to make a choice. Choices mean the availability of multiple things for you to decide, and freedom to make a choice. Freedom to make a choice comes when you have money or purchasing power, right? So the government has created an elaborate system of giving them a lot of subsidies, etc., based upon a transmission network which is leaking heavily. Prime Minister Modi has shut it down. I think he has saved about 1.5 to 2 lakh crores in the last 5 years by cutting off all the leakages, but that's a tremendous job. But what Prime Minister Modi has truly done is to empower the ordinary Indian who will get money in the bank. Now, what is the total extent of subsidy in the country? The total extent of subsidy in the country is 7,50,000 crores. 7,50,000 crores on a GDP of 200 lakh crores. 200 lakh crores is about maybe 3.5%, right? 3.75%. Now, what is the subsidy for? 2 lakh crore is food subsidy given by the government of India. 75,000 crore is the fertilizer subsidy, government of India. 70,000 crores is the Kisan subsidy, 2,000 rupees per every 3 months, 4 months, given thrice a year. And then you have got that Marega scheme of 65,000 crores and some interest subsidy from the government of India. Government of India gives about 3.5 lakh or 3.75 lakh crores, nearly 4 lakh crores. The state governments also give subsidy. About 50,000 crores is subsidy for the food, because Karnataka gives you more grains and Karnataka gives you free rice. Most states do that. And then they have got some 50,000 crores of DBT. Like Karnataka gives you 4,000 rupees per farmer. UP is giving that kind of money. Telangana is giving that kind of money. Odisha is giving that kind of money. Then 1 lakh crore power subsidy. Karnataka alone has 10,000 crore of power subsidy, half of which is robbed, plus another 2,000 crore which we cross-subsidized, 12,000 crores. So I'm taking only 1 lakh crore for the whole country. Everywhere farmers get almost free power, and half of it is wasted or stolen. And then 1 lakh crore of water subsidy. The amount of money spent on irrigation must be, right from India's inception to now, must be about 20-25 lakh crores all over the country. And they don't pay for water. And water is almost free and is wasted. And then they got interest subsidy, loan waivers. So 7,50,000 crores odd is the total subsidy. Now, there's a population of 137 crore people, maybe about 35 crore families, if you take some calculation, out of which 15 crore families can be below the poverty line. You can cross-verify that. Now, if you pay 15 crore families 4,000 rupees a month by DBT, remove all that, that'll be about 60,000, that'll be about 60,000 crores. 60,000 into 12, 7,20,000 crores. So what do? You transfer 4,000 crores into the bank account of every individual who's below the poverty line. Easy to identify. Government has got the database. They use the money to buy their rice or grain, to send their children to education, buy everything else, because it gives you the power to decide and the power to make a choice. Now that is democracy. Democracy is the ability to make a choice and the availability of choices. Now that is what I think is important in this DBT. So DBT is a mechanism to reach the Aam Aadmi directly without going to an intermediary. DBT is a mechanism to empower the ordinary Indian, and DBT is a mechanism to make sure there is no leakage. And all these things have been done using technology by Prime Minister Modi. So that article says that this is the money. Now you can say, I still want to have some schemes, but I'll give 2,000 rupees per month. Fine, give 2,000 rupees. I want to give 3,000 rupees as a center-state partnership. Now UP can sign an MOU. UP is much poorer than Karnataka. Maybe they don't have so many schemes. Karnataka is a rich state. It may have lesser people, may give more money. So a center-state partnership where DBT is given and much of the subsidies is cut down and money is given directly, I think will transform India. And more than that, give the poor dignity and respect. If you read the Constitution, the preamble says to assure the dignity of the individual. Dignity is important for every individual, self-worth, dignity. So DBT will give dignity because you'll have purchasing power. That is the theme of the paper.
So I had a follow-up to this. now, to summarize your suggestion, what you're saying is rather than having piecemeal subsidies where, let's say, X chunk of the subsidy goes in grains, Y chunk of the subsidy even goes in things, basic things like, say, healthcare, or a systemized or a part of healthcare, what you're saying is we rather quantify the amount and put it directly in the account or of the beneficiary, or we can create a ratio where maybe, some parts of the subsidy can be given still in the form of, say, you still get food grains, and some part of it is converted into cash. Now, I'll give you my experience of working under the Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana, where we were, the Prime Minister's scheme was basically every member of parliament has to adopt X number of villages, and then you build the villages, you do a survey, and you build them from scratch, and you develop those villages. So this is my experience of working in 2 villages in rural Maharashtra. Now, when I went into those villages, what I found was that social realities of our society are complex. Now, if we were to have a system where we transfer the money directly into the account of the beneficiary, it seriously starts to matter who gets the money. Does the man of the house get the money, or the woman of the house gets the money? Because I in my own experience, that I did see that if the woman of the house did not get the money, she was in trouble. She would have a lot of problems, because you have alcoholism and you have a lot of these problems that already exist in certain stratas of society, irrespective of your financial position. So where do you think we can draw the balance in something like this? We obviously have to plug in all the problems. There is immense corruption in this entire subsidy distribution system, where you have I'll give you an example. There is something called the Thakkar Bappa scheme in Maharashtra. And under the Thakkar Bappa scheme, so you can take projects up to a few lakhs, and the projects have to cost. Now, the beauty of that scheme is it doesn't define what exactly can you spend. So you can use the Thakkar Bappa scheme to even build a small village road which is under 15 lakhs. So you can take up a scheme where under the Thakkar Bappa scheme where you can install solar panels. So when we design a scheme like this, don't you think we have to factor in this sociological aspect too, Mr. Pai?
Kushal, I agree with you. The suggestion is that it must go into the bank account of the woman of the house, the woman in the family, because all evidence says that when money comes to the woman, she spends it on the family, on the children, for education, etc., and all that. Now, this is the argument that many leftists give, and they've been giving it for a long time. But remember, Kushal, human beings are survivors. Indians have survived for hundreds and thousands of years, all kind of oppression. They take decisions. Yes, there will be some misuse. Some will be drunkards, some will be misused. But it's not that everybody will be misusing the money all the time. Now, it could well apply to you, right? You are an educated person. You earn money. Your wife stays at home. Now, you could be a drunkard and you could deprive her of money. And can the government say, look, I will, I should not pay you the salary. I'll give it to your wife or somebody else. Now, there will be misuse. We should not be guided by the fact that there is misuse, because all government schemes are guided by the fact that we misuse, the over-engineer it, and then spoil the whole thing and create leakages and create discretion in the hands of the officials. So yes, there will be misuse. Give it to the woman of the house, and then create a mechanism of monitoring. I think there are enough mechanisms of monitoring to make sure that from time to time people go, people inspect, people see. And I think this will work to a great extent. But it cannot be all in cash. For example, health. I think health, they must get health insurance. With health insurance, they can go everywhere else, not make them pay, because they'll be very expensive for them. Some things are cheaper on a group level. Some things are more important. For example, education. I think for education, the state must guarantee education to everybody. And in case the state schools are not very good, the states can give a voucher to say, here is a voucher. It is worth 10,000 rupees. If you don't like the government school, you go to any school and give it there, and they will accept it, will pay them and get education. That means the right to admit your child comes to you. So we must design scheme based on empowering the individual, not design scheme on a command and control basis. That is the big issue. No command and control. Empower individuals. Do all the things. It could be a mix of everything else. That is true. Some things work best when you give money. Some things don't work best because there's distribution. The cost could be higher. There could be shortages. Yes. So you have to design it properly, but increase the quantum of cash and reduce the quantum of supplies that you do free, so that people have more discretionary money to spend. And you'll see remarkable results in a short period of time.
All right, got it. Okay, so Anuraag, let's shift gears now, as to say. So obviously, I mean, for full disclosure, Anuraag and I have recently co-authored an article together, and Anuraag, I wanted to focus a bit on the aspects that we tried to raise in that article, but I want you to start, obviously. So from where you see things, Anurag, as of now, what do you see happening as far as the economy is concerned? Give me the picture of what you see happening, what is the reality, and what can be done in terms of short term micro and long term macro.
Well, so thanks, Kushal. I am going to take a slightly tangential and X and Y axis approach to what Mohandas ji just said. So MDP talked about the historical nature of how economics has been dealt with from Nehruvian command and control, blah, 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 till today. I'm going to take a point in time view of how various other aspects of the Modi regime, have dealt with different aspects. I mean, look at India's diplomatic effort. Right? It is the record of the last 4-5 years has been stellar. I mean, we've been asserting ourselves internationally like no one ever has. If you look at outreach from a healthcare point of view and from multiple points of view, there have been really huge, ambitious strides that have been made in the last 5-6 years. Unfortunately, those of us who are on the ground do not see those strides being made on the financial policy, on the economic policy front. Going back to the article that we co-authored, you see, at a fundamental level, here is the problem I have with the way, again, the objective of this podcast is to discuss the economic stimulus package. Right. What we are seeing right now is this whole COVID or Chinese virus situation is a public problem for which the government is expecting a private solution from the economic point of view. The first tranche of relief measures that Nirmala ji announced was largely for social aspects, for healthcare, PPE kits, medicines, blah, blah, blah. It was to protect India from the downside. So far, nothing has been announced to ensure the upside. So, the phase 2, we are still waiting. Now, again, if you were to look at it in macro terms, right? Poland has announced 4.5% of their GDP as a stimulus package. Australia 9%, Germany 4.9%. Countries like Bahrain are doing 4.2%. Singapore, where I live, is 12%. USA, through the CARES Act, has announced a huge stimulus package. And again, people keep comparing. USA is big, Germany is big, India is not big, we are still poor, and they say the whole archaic, unambitious leftist approach. So then you look at countries which are more comparable, like say a Bangladesh or a Turkey or whatever else. There have been a lot of, the size of the package is bigger. More importantly, what I care about is, rather than focusing on just a big announcement as well, there is a lot of focus on the tactics. There is a lot of focus not on what are we announcing, but how will it actually deliver the impact on the ground. Monica Halan has written a beautiful article on these big bang announcements that the RBI makes. Right. So, the reverse repo rate is cut and so on and so forth. What is the incentive that a bank has today to get the money to you? Now, you, and when I say you metaphorically, you are the real job creator. You are the guy. You could be making furniture, you could be making textiles, you could be making shoes, you could be owning a tempo, etc., etc. A bank today will just naturally, and this is not just an India phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. A bank would try and stay safe and say, no, let's not transmit the money. Let's give it to A+ companies. Now, what is an A+ company? Or, an A+ company is a company that's already liquid. A bank might introduce norms to say that, okay, we'll give it to AAA, A-, blah, 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 which is already an investment grade company. That company has the ability to generate capital through other sources as well, and therefore need not need the kind of money that, let's say, the MSME sector needs. There's a lot of NSTC data on the kind of manpower that the small and medium enterprises empower in India. The trouble I see is, India has not made that big bang announcement, and I absolutely understand the fact that we want to do it in a phased manner. B, there is no transparency around what that phased manner looks like, which basically means everybody is on the edge of their seats and really worrying and things like that. And C, there is no clarity on the tactical aspects of it. I'll give you, if you give me a minute, I'll give you 3 or 4 very simple examples, right? Azerbaijan, for example, announced that banks will be open for 7 days a week, right? Argentina has announced a stay on the bouncing of checks, which is a criminal offense in India. You have a whole bunch of countries, Australia, Bahrain, Bangladesh, France, who said you don't need to pay electricity bills or water bills. Utilities are free for you for the next few months. Or that the government will pay salaries of anybody that is displaced because of a lack of working capital, in an MSME enterprise. So there are a lot of tactical efforts that have been announced, which I don't see happening in India, right? So it seems like we are stuck at the 30,000 feet view, and we're responding to a crisis in metaphors rather than in solutions. And I would like to start seeing more solutions if we have to come out of this alive.
I couldn't agree with you more. And here I want to get Mr. Pai's opinion too. So hear me out for a couple of minutes. So this is what I feel. Somewhere in our governance system, this is what I feel, Mr. Pai. We are a trust deficit society when it comes to the relationship between the businesses, the citizenry, and the state, the government. Now, let us take a very concrete example, Mr. Pai. So the government said, oh yeah, so your TDS filings, you can delay them by XYZ day. And look how nice we are. We are reducing the penalty from 18% interest to 9% interest. Now, that is like adding insult to injury. It's like you give me a cut and then you come here like, okay, boy, come here. Okay, show me your hand. Let me rub some salt on your wounds now. As if, anyways, your revenue stream is completely shut. I mean, I'll give you my business example, Mr. Pai. It's 21st was when my factory was shut. 22nd was the Janta curfew. Since that day till date, I've not received a single penny in my bank account. Not even a paisa. And then when I listen to announcements like this, where look how nice we are. We're only killing one hand. From 18%, we've made it 9%. So that hurts. So how do we get over this trust deficit? And the second aspect of it is we always try to overcomplicate things to showcase to I don't know whom, to be very honest. This has been my experience. We tend to believe that if we create a very overcomplicated, we will be full of, big jargons that the economists love to use. And it will be as if, the person who is a businessman like me sitting in some corner in India and watching the press conference, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, in my head, I'm going to use the Hindi line. It's like, कहना क्या चाहते हो भाई? I mean, we just get confused. So how do we get over this trust deficit? I mean, I ask you, as an entrepreneur, where have we gone wrong?
Kushal, let me say at the beginning that the bureaucracy is still part of the colonial state. The state apparatus is colonial. What the British did is still here. The bureaucrats think they're the masters of the universe. They have to rule over us. They are rulers, not our servants. They're not here to provide service. They are rulers. And they believe they have the right to rule. And the political class, sadly, does not overrule them. Now, in a representative democracy, we elect our leaders. The leaders have to apply judgment, listen to us, and then come out with policy. They have to talk to the bureaucrats to understand their point of view because they are the permanent people in the government, and then come out with policy. Now it is the responsibility of the politicians to build a culture of trust in people, wherein all the policies say, we trust you, we open up everything, please do right. If you betray our trust, you're going to go to jail. Now look at the tax laws. Every year, even in the Modi regime, there have been more and more clauses into the tax law, giving more and more draconian powers to the tax authorities. Yet, tax evasion still goes on. The tax mechanism still goes on. Corruption in the tax department still goes on. Tax terrorism still goes on. And nobody is able to do anything. I mean, the CBTD is a bystander. The Ministry of Finance for Taxes is not able to bring in the right policies. They got the Pashati Shom report. They got the Kelkar committee report, all kind of report. I don't think they even read it to come and do that. Yet, every year they do more and more. Just look at what they did last time. They increased the capital gains tax to 28%. for unlisted companies. So if you invest in a startup today and you make a little bit of money after 5 years, you got to pay 28% above a certain income level. Now, nowhere in the world you put 28%. Then they say it's above 5 crores, your tax goes up by 37% surcharge and 37% on the entire tax up to 5 crores. It is not above 5 crores. And why? The bureaucrats told the finance minister only 6,000 people will be impacted. 60,000 people are impacted. Then the CBDT chairman went and said, when the FPIs came and protested, it's going to impact them because they are taxed as individuals. He said this collateral damage. Can you make such statement? Then they said, why didn't you become a company? This insensitive. They don't understand how the markets work. But the market tanks and 15 lakh crores were gone. They came and amended. And when they amended, they did only for listed. The rest of us were citizens. So we created a tax system which gives favorable tax treatment to people who are invest from outside. And all of us get hurt very badly. And we are treated like thieves. Your assessments are not done on time. Your refunds are not given on time. In my case, assessment has been done. Order issued. Refund has not come for some time. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go back for my refund? Now look at what the government has done. We suggested the government in the first letter we wrote, first article we wrote, give all the tax refunds due to people, open up. We have filed returns, give all the refunds. They did not do it. Give the GST refund. They did not do it. And they promised the state governments 14% guaranteed increase in revenue for coming to the GST. And the commitment made by the central government, they did not do it because we don't have revenues. Now they say we'll give the tax refund up to 5 lakh rupees per assessee. Only 14 lakh people, only 18,000 crores, include GST is done. Why didn't you give it to everybody? It's our money. It's not your money. Nowhere in the world that the tax department hang on to your money and say, we will not pay you a refund because we got time to pay you the refund and we'll pay you only 6% interest. And when you have to pay tax and you default, you got to pay 18% interest. I mean, the government is not a money lender. Now you can say, you pay me 10% interest, but I'll charge you a penalty. Penalty is different from charging interest for delay. Now look at the way this whole thing is configured. And why is that? In Parliament, when the finance bill is read, not a single MP makes the point. Not a single MP argues. The debate is pathetic. It's poor for the last 10, 15 years. They all make some politics. They talk about something that happened somewhere, but none of them make any good points of the tax bill. And it passes away. And then what happens? Even the finance minister does not, I think, go through all the tax proposal to understand what is happening. And I think at the end of it, we get shafted. Then when we go back to the finance minister, I mean, they listen to us. And look at this comedy. Before the budget, they have meetings. We all go make our submissions. They listen. They don't do anything. And then after the budget, they go around the country. They show that democratic, listen to everybody. Nothing happens. For example, ESOPs, taxation of ESOP for startups. We all went and said it's unworkable because of the fact that there is a pricing issue. When do you price? You have to price in the last round, and the illiquid stock you can't sell. And tomorrow, if you give a deferment, tomorrow the company goes down, the tax liability remains. We said we want to change that. Listen to us. They wrote. And then they said, no, we can't do it. I mean, there's like a block, and the finance and the political leaders there don't listen to you. They listen to the bureaucrats. They don't trust the citizens. They don't want to look at logic. They listen to the bureaucrats. It's a colonial state. The only solution for that, Kushal, is that the political leaders have to take the step. They have to ask a few questions. One, they must say, is it good for everybody? Will it build trust in citizens? Am I building trust? Two, why am I putting all these draconian powers given to these tax authorities? Am I making them more powerful to terrorize citizens? What is the remedy? What is the quick thing that has to be done? Third, before a tax proposal comes, give me an impact analysis. Whom is it going to impact? What is the impact? Put in the public domain. Now, after GST is come, the only place where you have some tax discretion is excise on fuel that you can do anytime, and then income tax. Now, income tax proposals in many civilized countries, mark my word, are done ahead of time. They put it up, they ask for public comment, they do everything. Here there is secrecy. Why should there be secrecy? Once what happened, I went to a former finance minister who had put tax on ESOPs at the time of vesting. There's grant, vesting, and exercise. We went and told him, when it's vest, you just pay. You're not selling because you get the right, but you don't pay the money. Then he said, Mohan, I understand what you're selling. At the time of the budget, 2 or 3 of us sit down 48 hours before the budget has to be delivered. We sit and go through everything. We make a point. We don't have all the knowledge. We don't know anything else. And we do it. We make mistakes. Now, that's the way the secrecy. Why should there be secrecy? Why can't it be debated? It's a colonial state built on oppression, built on suppression, on arrogance, intellectual arrogance, with the bureaucrats think everything. And our political leaders are not doing things. Well, Prime Minister Modi has broken the mold, I'm happy to say, by doing DBT, by forcing them to do certain things, by having about 250 tax authorities who have been found corrupt to retire, taking action against them. He's doing it. But all the ministers have to step up to the plate and ask some fundamental questions and see it from the citizen point of view. And the sad thing is, Kushal, many of the bureaucrats say, after I leave the government, I'm harassed for my pension. When they are outside, they are the receiving end. Then they understand what it means, because they don't understand that arrogance of power has to go. The culture has to go. And the culture can only go if the politicians who listen to us, all the political leaders who are ministers should have a set of people who are civilians whom they listen to, and they argue it out and they debate, so they become knowledgeable. You can't expect them to be fully knowledgeable, but they have to be very, very knowledgeable. The last point I'll give some data. There are some 4 lakh prisoners in our jails. 2.5 lakh are under trials. 50% of them are served more than 50% sentence. All of them are poor. They can't get bail. Why can't you let them free? The Supreme Court has passed an order that if you're charged for a offense and you spend more than 50% of the time in jail pending the trial, because that thing has not happened, you can be let free. But nobody's doing it. Nobody's following it. Why can't you do that? There's so many things the state oppresses. It's the colonial oppressive state which has to be redesigned. Another thing, Kushal, have you seen a policeman beat people with a lathi in any part of the world? Policemen go with a lathi, beat them on the head, beat them black and blue. Some people are coming out of the mosque, they're illegal. When they came out, the policeman has beaten them black and blue. You can't beat people. You can't beat people. The law doesn't give you the right to beat people. But they beat people. And the police you can't beat people. Now, the police don't have the equipment to protect themselves. They need protective gear. They need a helmet, they need body armor, they need everything else. But they should not beat people. They should not use violence unless they're the receiving end of the violence. Then they can use violence last resort. Here they do a lathi charge, beat up people. They can't do that. See, that is the colonial state, and that is the basic root why there is no trust built in a society, and political leaders have to take the responsibility to build trust.
Anuraag, you wanted to say something?
Well, yeah, I think, okay, so great points. And I think an average Indian, whether he earns, 2,000 rupees a month or 2,000 crores a month, will absolutely agree with MDP on this issue. Specifically coming to the whole COVID situation, I look at it as a more tactical opportunity, the interplay between the bureaucracy, the announcements, the delivery of those announcements, etc. If you look at bureaucrats per se, the selection process ensures that the cream of the cream, the most highly skilled across the country, actually make it to become IAS officers, IFS officers, IRS officers, what have you. So clearly the talent exists, right? If you look at the training, the incentives and the motivations after that, all of them are tied to a BAU state, to a business as usual state. Bureaucrats are taught to handle situations which are predictable, which are status quo. Here, I believe, is a huge opportunity, given that we are in an extraordinary circumstance for which bureaucrats have neither been hired, nor trained, nor have gained experience. At this stage, to actually bring in a true Bhagidari concept, a public, to bring in experts from, as Mohandas ji said, as citizens, and actually let them deal with it in extraordinary times. You look at the US as an example, right? You have corporate and government sharing people cyclically. Somebody could be the CEO of GM and could go back to being the Secretary of State, could leave then and join as the chairman of Ford. These things have actually happened. There's no reason why that cannot happen in India. It is happening with lateral entry scheme and this and that, but not in a big way. So simple questions right now, right? Given that we know bureaucrats are neither hired nor trained nor experienced to handle extraordinary situations, why should we not have a group of doctors that decides how PPE kits should be ordered, procured, and distributed? Why cannot we have a group of industrialists who decide how, from a tactical perspective, a bailout package will actually be distributed to people that genuinely need it, rather than RBI making an announcement, giving it to archaic institutions who are now stuck with that money, right? Why not have a group of, let's say we come out of it, right? Why not we have a group of fund managers who decide what an Invest in India roadshow looks like. I'm just giving 2 or 3 random examples here. There is so much of positive intent within citizens in India today. Over the last 6-7 years, we have seen a resurgence in pride. We have seen a resurgence in ambition of an average Indian on the street. There are just so many people who could, given their time, their inputs, their bandwidth, and contribute to dealing with the situation. Instead of that, we now have, we are now depending on the same archaic models, which go back to an era that was designed to subdue us, that was designed to suppress us, that was designed to make us less confident and less assertive about ourselves. A system that is structured to make you meek can never deliver an assertive nation. And I think therein lies the problem.
Kushal, if I can say a few things.
Sure.
Look at the relationship between business and the government. It goes back to the Nehruvian era, when Nehru had disdain for Indian capital. He suppressed Indian capital. When India became free, it was the largest economy in Asia, because Japan was destroyed, China went through 100 years of war, and Southeast Asia was destroyed. Largest economy, £1.5 billion was receivable as debt from Great Britain at that point of time. Yes, it's a poor country, but it had an existing infrastructure. What did Nehru do? Nehru suppressed private capital, said only the public sector will come. After the first plan where he focused on irrigation, he went in for massive, big projects, did not allow the private sector to flourish, create the license quota Raj, centralized economic decision making. And the famous story when JRD went to meet him, and JRD spoke to him, he said, profit is a dirty word. Who is Jawaharlal Nehru to say profit is a dirty word? He must understand he is not the master of the universe. He was not a ruler. He is our representative. This country belongs to everybody, every economic agent. And that attitude of disdain for business, the idea is that government will do business, continues even till today. Why should government do business? Gandhiji made a beautiful point. Gandhiji said, this desh mein sarkar vyapari hai, us desh mein janta bikari hai. They made bikaris out of us. Why should there be such a large public sector when the private sector can do things? If the private sector cannot do it, then the public sector should come. We went to NASA, on a tour. They took us around and told us, NASA's mandate is to do things the private sector cannot do, for whatever reason. If the private sector can do it, we will withdraw. Now look at the rockets. Rockets are being sent by the private sector. Why should public money be wasted? DRDO is doing so much of research, and they say not much comes out of it, but research can be done in a public-private partnership. Now we are one of the largest importers of defense. Why is that over the last 60, 70 years? Because we are not built up indigenous capacity. Prime Minister Modi is doing it now because the government doesn't trust people. And when you import, there are occasions for people to make money. Commission agents, retired bureaucrats get employed. Middlemen can come in, they can make money. Whereas you locally manufacture, empowered people, the purchases come down. So they don't want to do that. They wanted to get aid. So many of the bureaucrats' wives can set up NGOs and get money, etc. The network in Delhi, how the things happen there with all these international organizations. And this kind of a network has been the disdain for business. We must trust business, because the government must not do what business can do. There must be strong regulations. There must be protection of the consumer, because that is the role of the government. But the role of the government is not to run the business. And look at Air India, what a big disaster. 75,000 crores gone down the drain. Look at BSNL, 1 lakh crore gone down the drain. Whose money is that? BSNL was supposedly worth 5 lakh crore and Bharti was coming up. They destroyed it. Every company that they do is getting destroyed. BHEL is now going down. They're not able to do well because they got competition. Public sector banks, the last 5 years, 60% of lending is by the private sector banks. They all been sick because of telephone banking. Why? Because once you have the state doing business, politicians can control it. They can take control and they can take the spoils. Now that must go, because people's money is precious and business must be trusted. Now the business doesn't do well, you can go after them. Set up the courts and make sure that the courts work. Now we have created this entire centralized corrupt system where you don't trust business. Like Anuraag said, in the US, like Anuraag said, though, the government doesn't seem to trust people. Why can't they have a group of businessmen coming, giving advice how to do a package? Look at what happened in the US. In the US, they transferred $300 billion to thousands of MSMEs. They transferred money to the bank account immediately. They didn't see who is who. They transferred money. Here, if you get any government money, the whole apparatus will be after you and they will go and harass you. Today, let me tell you, Anuraag, Kushal, what is the problem? What solution we need? One, we need income tax, GST, and 14% tax to states, 1 lakh crore has to be given. Now, all the payment to contractors for building roads, railway infrastructure, for health services, all kind of government services, I think about 1 lakh crore is due. They should pay it out immediately. And they should make sure that they give money for infrastructure contracts, etc. They must trust business and work with business to make sure, because Kushal, this country belongs to us. All of us own this country. It's not the bureaucracy in Delhi's country. It's not their country. It's our country. We are the taxpayers. We pay them to govern this country, not to rule over this country. And further, the political leaders have to insist, trust the private sector, give it out, create competition, and then make sure that they follow the rules and have transparent rules. Not so many regulations with criminal action. Look at the Companies Act. There's some 80, 90 sections for criminal action, and not one single person has been persecuted the last many years. I have not heard about it. So many things. So Income Tax Act can arrest you. How many people have been arrested for tax evasion? There's been tax evasion for 50, 60 years. And when they actually go after you, they don't know how to prosecute. They don't know what to do because there's no prosecution capacity. It goes on and on and on. So I think we have built a command and control state. It has to be dismantled. We need a justice system which works and gives justice. And we need a system based on trust. And if you break the trust, yes, you must be punished.
I mean, look at Coffee Posa. Look at Coffee Posa as an example. It is ridiculous that an act like Coffee Posa that was introduced around the time of emergency exists still today, and it is used to selectively harass people. It's surprising. But on a little more, this will come across as facetious, but it is not meant to come across as facetious. I was just looking at the way the narrative has been developing around this whole relief package and stimulus package issue. Over the last couple of days, so Mohan has written, Kushal, you have written, I have written, a dozen people who are from the industry or connected to the industry have given very tactical measures on how this relief package should be delivered. You had associations like FICCI, CII, NASSCOM. You had local associations like the textile manufacturers of Tirupur, the diamond cutting industry from Surat. I know of at least 100 organizations who are facing the issue that are talking about A, the need for a stimulus package, and B, the delivery mechanism. Now let us look at who is saying that the stimulus package is not needed. It is our current version of the Delhi consensus, right? You have either a journalist or somebody from a think tank or a bureaucrat or a former bureaucrat. So essentially people in Delhi who have no skin in the people whose salaries or livelihoods are not tied to a stimulus package, who are saying that, boss, you don't need a stimulus package, which is, I find, a very condescending approach. तो से कि बॉस मेरे पास सब कुछ है, मैं खाना खा रहा हूं, तुमको खाना खाने की जरूरत नहीं है. क्यों? क्योंकि मैं तुमसे ज्यादा ज्ञानी हूं, मैं तुम्हें बता रहा हूं कि तुम्हें खाना खाने की जरूरत नहीं है, खाना बाद में बांटेंगे.
Kushal, one small point. Kushal, if you look at the sectors, the economy, agriculture, industry, services, and in services there are 4 or 5 sectors. The only sector that will not see a degrowth or negative growth is the government sector. The government spending will increase by 13-14% because it consists of salaries to the bureaucrats, pension. Their pension is assured, salary is assured. Now I have a suggestion. Why can't the government say, Prime Minister Modi say, for this year, there will be no increase in the DA payment to all government bureaucrats, the government system and pensioners for 1 full year. If inflation goes up this year, you are entitled to DA, the DA will not be given. 1 year will be fully waived, and that is the thing that you have to bear because we are going through a deep crisis. Because all of us have lost income for maybe 1 or 2 months. For the next 3 or 4 months, business is not going to come back. Soumya Kanti Ghosh wrote that 37 crore people who are the unorganized sector people, they lost about 4.05 lakh crore of income because of no work for the last 45 days. So there is pain, and I believe the government sector should also suffer the pain, and there should be no increase in the DA paid for the full year. It should be fully waived. Now that is what is called sharing. Everybody should share the pain, and then they will understand that they are very secure. They get the money in the bank because we pay taxes, and if we don't pay taxes, government will go and borrow. They get it. Now I have sympathy for the doctors, I have sympathy for the armed forces, I have the sympathy for the paramilitary and all that. For all of them, I think we should protect them. They're putting their life on the line. But I think, there should be something that others should also pay.
No, I couldn't agree more. So some questions on the live chat were very interesting. So Rajat says every crisis is an opportunity to correct a system. Do you foresee that there will be lessons learned to improve our bureaucracy post-COVID crisis? So Rajat, I will take this question for a change on the podcast. So I'll give you an example. So, Anuraag will back me up. So as Anuraag and I were planning to write this article and we were having our discussions, so Anuraag was like, so Anurag's first question was in Hindi, like, "Tujhe क्यों लिखने की इच्छा हुई?" So Anurag actually told me, "तुझे लिखने की इच्छा क्यों हो रही है?" So I was like, "यार मैंने बांग्लादेश का fiscal stimulus package पढ़ लिया गलती से." And we have this amazing ability in our country, Rajat, where we love to overcomplicate things. Now I'll give you an example of how simple the Bangladeshi stimulus package is. I'll just give you 3 points. I mean, imagine Bangladesh gets it apparently. They just made a very simple package. So the first thing they said was 5,000 crore taka will be kept aside to pay the salaries of the staff and workers. The government keeps that aside. Then there were 2 very pointed observations. They said the lending interest rate to the businesses, small, large, medium, whatever, will be fixed at 9%. The banks will lend at 9%. And then they created 2 subcategories within that. There will be a subsidy and not a post facto subsidy, an upfront subsidy, by the way. To the big businesses, they will only have to pay an interest of 4.5%, and 4.5% will be the subsidy by the government that will be paid directly to the banks. Directly to the banks, I repeat. In the case of small to medium scale industries, they went even further. They said, okay, we will pay 5% interest subsidy to the bank. Small businesses only pay 4% interest. Now, here's such a simple fiscal stimulus package. Now, let's turn the tables, come to India. I can guarantee you, I'll use it in a jokes format. Whenever we see those mutual fund ads, right, on TV, and then in the end, mutual funds are subject to market risk, please, and they just go very fast in the end because they want to save time in the ad. That's what our bureaucrats do. They give us, we have announced this, and the announcement, everybody's like, wah, 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 maja aa gaya. And then there are this, there is a litany of kintu, parantu, if, but, maybe, it is, we are like, all our bureaucrats are neo-Advaitins. Everything is Maya. So they love to confuse the living daylights out of us. So let us now, Mr. Pai, I want to start now. We have to focus on the biggest chunk of our economy, which is the MSME sector. Now, I had a few suggestions. I made this. So I'll give you a tangible example of how the government messed up. You made a very brilliant point when you said, why did the TDS limit have to be set up to 5 lakhs only for individuals and organizations? I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say there is a job worker. The job worker runs a lathe machine or some kind of a job. Now, we know there is a 2% TDS cut on every bill that is raised on the job work. Now, even a small to small guy who has hardly got a turnover of 5 crores per annum. 5 crores is not a big turnover in India in terms of the size of our economy now. Now, that guy has 10 lakhs of his TDS cut. The income tax after profit, whatever income tax that person would be paying is around 2 to 3 lakhs, maybe 4 lakhs after all the expenses. Imagine even a guy with a turnover of 5 crores, if their TDS refund is 6 lakhs, the government thinks they are too big to get the TDS refund. What do we do, Mr. Pai?
You see, I'll tell you, Kushal, the key is a political leaders should stand up and take a decision. Decision has to be taken by a political leaders. And I think this is where the finance minister has to step in and say, my job is to protect the citizens of this country in time of crisis. I've taken care of the bottom of the pyramid, the farmers, the BPL sector, etc. Now I need to focus the MSMEs. What should I do to make the life easier? One simple thing, like Anuraag said, and you also said, RBI has now come out and said that I'm going to increase liquidity in the money market, etc. Do you know that I read somewhere that 6,30,000 crore has been parked by banks with RBI as deposit because it's surplus money? They're not lending to the MSMEs. Why is that? They're saying, who's going to take the credit risk? Why can't the government set up a 50,000 crore credit guarantee fund to say, I will take the first 10% loss of the incremental money that you give to the MSMEs and increase all their working capital by 20%. Just say, you got 1 crore, I'm giving you 20 lakhs more. okay, as part of your working capital, same security, etc. And tell the banks, if you suffer any loss, first 10%, I will bear it. And I'm putting aside 50,000 crores. That will incentivize the bank to lend. Now, SBI chairman has gone out of the way to say, I'll give 10% more working capital to all good accounts. That's fine. Now, that is magnanimous of a great bank chairman. Now, why can't the government step in to do that? Because banks are saying, tomorrow I bear a loss, who is going to give me capital? I'll be hauled up, my pension will go, my retirement benefits will go, the CBI will go after me, all kind of stuff, because they're not allowed to take decisions. Now, RBI should also talk to government and do something like that. Because what is the point of creating liquidity where big companies come and take money cheap? The public sector money comes cheap. Because today, Kushal, what we need for MSMEs is liquidity, not solvency. They're solvent. They're good, but they don't have liquidity. Now we have to make the payroll for April. There are 8 crore people in PF and ESI subscribers, 8 crore formal workers. They have to make the payroll in April with the cash to make the payroll. All of us want to keep employees in the payroll. Prime Minister said, don't let them go. Yes, we don't want to let them go. We don't want to hurt people, but we need the cash to pay. If your bank account is jammed, you can't collect, like you said, you can't collect receivables, you can't make payables, no money coming in, your account is up to the brim. How will you pay? Your checks will come back. What are you supposed to do? You can't do anything. You're all frozen. Now you must defreeze, and defreezing requires thinking out of the box, something like this.
So just to give you a perspective, so last night, I think it was around 11:30 p.m. in the night, I was talking to a friend from my industry, textiles, and we're just having a discussion. I don't want to disclose the place of where he has his factory because we don't know which Babu will go after them. And he was complaining and complaining. I was like, क्या हुआ भाई? I was like, यार ठुकी पड़ी है, करंट अकाउंट में 5,000 रुपए है, कलेक्टर का लेटर आता है, अप्रैल की सबको पगार कंपलसरी देनी पड़ेगी. How does one digest a letter like this, Anuraag? Tell me, at such a time.
So I have a very, very simple solution, right? So what is our problem today? You are being told, or across India, MSME sector has been told, ki shutters down, you cannot earn money, but you are obligated to keep spending money. You have to pay your bills on time, you have to pay your tax, you have to pay salaries, etc., etc., etc. We imagine that you will find a way to survive. If a bureaucrat asks you to do that, आप उसको बोलिए ठीक है सर, आप आ जाइए, आप मेरे गल्ले पे बैठिए, you please sit here and you answer phone calls. You figure out a way how money will come in. You figure out how exactly as MDP said, right? India does not have a profitability or whatever problem. It's a liquidity problem. If you look at the business community in India, historically, any Bania, any Gujarati, any Jain, any businessman, nobody, it's almost a pap to sit on cash today. You keep circulating your money somewhere or the other. If you hit some windfall benefit, आप और कुछ नहीं तो informal market में ब्याज पे चढ़ा देते हो पैसा, right? So today nobody has cash, nobody has liquidity, nobody has money. If a bureaucrat says कि no, you don't need the money to run a business or survive this crisis, you tell him कि please sir आप आके मेरी दुकान पे बैठिए. I am very happy to sit where you are. I am very happy to go sit on an economist's chair today to opine and give statements from morning to evening. Let them, if they feel my life is easy, let them come and sit where I am. Answer 101 phone calls and notices and letters.
Yeah, and here's the problem. So another good question has been asked by our live viewership. So Karan asks, doesn't this arbitrary limit for small companies, inverted tax structures, disincentivize companies from scaling up and growing? Anurag, I want you to take this one. What's your opinion on what Karan has asked?
You see here, back in the 90s when I was doing my CA, there's a very simple principle that we all understood. Everywhere there is a discretionary power, there is a scope for corruption way more than corruption. Right? There is a scope for taking sides, there is a scope for destabilizing industries, in many cases ending up in national security risks. Now, Karan's question is fundamentally structured. I mean, the question itself has the answer in it. The minute you are giving somebody an arbitrary power, you are destabilizing an existing situation. You are creating a downside. You're giving him the ability to create a downside. Now, exactly as Mohandas Ji was saying, it is not the job of the government to take these decisions. It is the job of the government to provide an infrastructure, to ensure safety and security and get out of the way. As far as somebody is legitimately doing business, let them do business. In times like these, it is, this is the day that we've all been paying tax for. Right? The reason we've all been contributing towards a huge layer of fat in the government is because in an unforeseen situation, public crisis, the public exchequer will help us out. So very clearly, I think question obviously is a small part of the much bigger change in thinking and then therefore action that is needed on the government side.
Kushal, Anuraag, what Anuraag said is very, very right. Now, why do you prevent small companies growing big? Because, the government, they think the small is beautiful, big companies are bad. Now, how did China become a large exporter? Not by small companies alone, but the big companies. You need capacity. In garments, I think they got huge companies providing, they're having thousands of people in the role for garment because they have to invest in the brand. So they have built the capacity. If you look at China's employment, India's employment, you find a very funny thing. The largest sector of employment in India, MSMEs, the largest sector there is the big companies. And the big companies are able to pay you better, give you social security, and do better. But in India, big companies are not favored. Big companies are hated. So you got to keep everything small. And you disincentivize small companies to grow bigger. And you have to incentivize, create a structure where they can all become big and they can get capital, they can grow resources, because that is a national imperative. And second, one important issue which you must understand, which is the root of all this, is the lack of justice in our system. Kushal, if you do wrong, it takes you 20 years to go to court and get a decision out. Government has no prosecution capacity. The courts don't work properly because they have no capacity. It goes on and on. So you are in a country where the justice system is broken down. Justice is not there. And the people who suffer are the poorest of the poor. And then what do? You try to rig up the system to make sure you get by. And the bad guys who break the law say, okay, go to court, let us see. Go to court, they hire a lawyer, get a stay. It goes on and you enjoy the spoils. So you have created a very perverse structure in society. So I think as part of the cleanup, we must have a good working justice system where for any matter you get decisions within 2 or 3 years, and we got enough capacity in the courts. Government builds up enough expertise to prosecute people in case of need, like the US, like UK, like any civilized country.
Anuraag, you wanted to say something?
Give a very specific example, which will be too close to MD's heart. Let's take the example of Infosys, right? Not as a provider, but as a client. Now, companies like Infi, Wipro, what have you, back in the day, you had Patni and a whole bunch of other companies came up. Now, Indians understood that the government does not have either the willingness or capacity to provide talent. So you had NIT and Aptech setting up. India knew you did not have the ability to provide clean, wholesome meals at reasonable prices. So you had Radhakrishna Hospitality Services, a bunch of them that set up, ending up with Sodexo, this, that, whatever. As a country, we knew that our public transport sucks. Nobody wants to work on it. So you had Chauhan Transport, this, that, whatever, that are today running a fleet of vans, Tata Indicas, and so on and so forth. So we have to trust India's ability to be jugadu, to be ambitious, to respond to emerging needs. All we need is the government to get out of the way. The whole old world, almost a Marxist mentality of Laghu Udyog, Kutir, which are very, very important. I mean, we need a revival of our rural economy. But at the same time, people who are showing a certain scale of ambition, let them grow huge. I mean, the word economies of scale comes from somewhere, right? And it's this whole implicit mentality which reflects in laws, in policies, in tribunal decisions, in every notice that you get, that ambition is bad, big is bad, is something we really need to get done with.
Not only that, my biggest problem in this entire scenario is that at the end of the day, and this is what in logic and philosophy, there's this famous saying which is called the Occam's razor. What does the Occam's razor say? Occam's razor say when you have multiple probable solutions to a problem, more often than not, the most simplest one is the correct one and the right one. That is what the Occam's razor says. This is the exact thing that our bureaucracy does not believe in. Now, what is the COVID-19 lockdown generated economic crisis? It's a black swan event, to use Nicholas Nassim Taleb's term. Now, it's a unheard of event. Nobody knew the economy and the world was going to shut down like this. I mean, almost more than half, or maybe 70% of mankind right now is basically sitting at their home and looking at the skies and saying, how nice, how beautiful. Basically, that's all we do on the daily basis. We just appreciate the blue skies. Now, eventually, when the rubber hits the road, we have to realize that there are some things in life that there is no substitute to. One of those things in life is money. There is no substitute. And it breaks my heart. And I was just going through the live comments, and look at this comment now. Please try and get an answer to this question. I have 5,000 rupees in my current account. How do I pay my workers' salaries? Such a simple comment, right? I mean, this guy or gal, I don't know what your gender is. I don't know. I don't want to assume your gender here. But this is the crux of the problem. And while we debate this, I don't know what's happening at the government level. There is no fiscal stimulus. And every time we'll have like, we don't want to do it in one shot. हम आपको थोड़ा थोड़ा करके देंगे. और जो देना दे दो ना भाई. At the end of the day, why don't, let me give you a simple example. Let's say the government announces we will sanction loans. Do they actually think that let the lockdown settle down, then all these businessmen should go to the banks, and then they start the paperwork? By the time the paperwork gets passed, another 2 months in the bloody economic downturn is added. Everybody is just sitting over there like an idiot, looking around here, there, everywhere. What are we supposed to do? See, these are I mean, we use the line in the article, extraordinary situations call for extraordinary measures. This was literally what we wrote in the article. It doesn't get more extraordinary than this situation. So, Mr. Pai, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to ask you, what is your last, I don't know, suggestion? Or, as we said, we are a colonial state, so we can only make a plea to the government. And that's what we're stuck with. We're just pleading with the government at this point of time. So what are your comments before we wrap?
Kushal, I believe only Prime Minister Modi can change the system and make India a better country. And I'll tell you why. In the first 5 years, he focused on the poor and gave them dignity and gave them hope and improved their lot, like I wrote in that article. No Prime Minister has done so much for the poor as Prime Minister Modi has done in those 5 years. Nehru did not help the poor because he didn't focus on primary education, primary health. He suppressed Indian capital, created a policy where India grew only 3.5% a year from 1950 to 1980, when the world grew at 4.5%, population grew at 2.5%. For 30 years, our per capita income grew only 1%. You can't be worse than that. So he has given the poor many, many things to live a life of dignity. Now, in the next 4 years, because next month is the first year, next 4 years, I would request him to focus on liberating Indians from the clutches of the bureaucracy, from all the restrictions and control that are unnecessary, to allow the flowering of the Indian entrepreneur and trust the entrepreneur and improve the system of justice so that India can grow faster. Now, this is an inflection point in our history. This is a black swan event. And in the black swan event, we must rethink the future of our society, rethink the future of our India, rethink all regulations, and come out with a new set of regulations, removing all the cobwebs, the control, the ideas, everything else, open it up to competition, put in proper safeguards, and make sure that you trust citizens. It's a great opportunity for them to do, free thinking, break out ideas and do it, because all the ideas are there. All the ideas, you don't have to rethink. Ideas are there, the solutions are there, everything is there. I'm sure Prime Minister Modi knows it too. And this is the time for him to show that for the next 10 years, I'm going to liberate you, and we are going to create a $10 trillion economy by 2030. And in 2030, there will be no poverty. We'll create $5 trillion by 2025. We are going to invest hugely in the next 10 years to give you good infrastructure. And we're going to make sure that everybody gets the minimum standards of life so that there's no poverty, and we will improve and we'll work together. I think that is what has to be done. The political leaders have to take control and tell the bureaucrats what they want and get it done. I mean, Sanjeev Sanyal is there, Subramaniam is there, Subbu is there as CEO. There are brilliant people in the government. Listen to them and act and do something which is good for the people. I'm sure he'll do it. But I have full trust in his ability because of his great track record in the past.
Anuraag?
Well, so on a lighter vein, you talked about Occam's razor. I'd like to spend a minute talking about the Hanlon's razor as well. Let's not forget that don't attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. So at some level, we have to remember the reality of incompetence that we're dealing with. Now, coming to the advice, guhar, whatever you want to call it, from my side there are three. One is, I think this is a great time to introduce transparency in economic thinking. Right, MDP talked about it, you talked about it, a whole bunch of people have been talking about it on Twitter and writing op-eds and things like that. This is a great time to trust people and say, here is our economic thought, right? This is what a stepped plan looks like. If we don't know, here is what we don't know. Here are if-then statements for us to deal with the economy. Two, simple, tactical, give blanket extension to anything that is expiring, anything that cannot be paid. Any law, any policy, any GO that was going to expire on 31st March this year, give it a blanket extension of 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, as whatever the case may be. Give people time to breathe, right? Third, it's a huge opportunity for the nation to truly democratize decisioning and bring in experts who are more than happy to help bail the situation out purely in terms of bandwidth and intellectual capital. I mean, look, this is more related, not just within India, across the country. There's a heart attack, unless there is a shock to the system, it will not revive itself. No point saying that I'm keeping my medicines for later. Here, please take a paracetamol and maybe feel okay next 2 days. This needs a shock to the system. And again, to echo MDP's points here, look, if you look at PM Modi's record from 15th of August 2014, when the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was announced, he has had the ability to capture people's imaginations. He has had the ability to bring, you see, India is a huge, complex, diverse country. You and your neighbor will disagree on 8 out of 10 things. You will wear different things. You might be vegetarian, they might be non-vegetarian. You might like Krishna, they might like Jesus. This is a hugely complex, we sometimes don't recognize how diverse this country is, just because we look the same in terms of skin color. Taking a huge diverse country, rallying everybody behind an agenda is an ability that Prime Minister Modi has had, which is unprecedented in our history, not just since independence, probably even before that. The public will rally around Prime Minister Modi if he comes out with big, ambitious changes, which have not even been imagined by him, let alone any of us. So my only message is that this is not the time to be coy or shy or unambitious. Think of Big Bang. Everybody says step changes, reformative measures, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying you truly have the ability to do things which were considered unimaginable even 2 years back. Unless we do that, we will not unshackle ourselves as a nation.
True. So just before we wrap things up, I just wanted to, acknowledge all the lovely viewers on the live chat and all the super chats. And this shows that how engaged an audience, the Cārvāka podcast has. And this shows that they listen to the guests and the host. They listen and they opine. So, Devin Satam says, how can the private sector and with municipal and state police machinery maintain law and order? Thoughts and ideas on that? Devin, that's a brilliant question, and that shows you were listening to Mr. Pai when he was talking about the police using the danda. So Devin, shout out to you. Thanks a lot. That was a brilliant observation. Kostubas is a little angry. He says DBT 2.0 is a great idea. Post that land, labor, and agri is the state with the state government, and privatization is gone for 2 years. And then our dear Prime Minister loves the Babu. What to do? You were listening to us. So thanks a lot for that. Ramesh, this is the best suggestion. And I think, Mr. Pai, you'll love this. Ramesh says we should tie a Babu's salary to performance indicators like GDP growth, HDI index, EODB index growth, etc. will shake up the system drastically. I think these guys who are listening to Mr. Pai very, very attentively and seriously. And last, I'll leave you with Manasa. Manasa had had also asked a question. What she meant, I think, if the government does give tax breaks or doesn't give tax breaks or a stimulus package to the MSMEs, is private investment in MSMEs the only alternative? Well, we don't know, Manasa. I think as far as private investment is concerned, where is the money at? At the end of the day, we don't know where the money is. We don't know the solution to that. And I honestly think there is only one solution to this situation. It is the government has to give in a fiscal stimulus. It is, I know the government is trying its best to, see how the curve bends, and it could well be that they might think that until and unless, the COVID curve starts bending downward, there's no point giving a fiscal stimulus. In their point of view, I don't agree with that personally, but yeah, they could be thinking like that. Having said that, at the end of the day, the one thing that scares me the most, and before we wrap things up, I just want to say this: India's biggest problem is trust deficit. We are a trust deficit society. The government doesn't trust us. We don't trust the government. And this is the time we as citizens of India, and I say this on behalf of everyone because I know everyone will agree with me. We need to tell the government in power, the Babus, we trust you. You are part of our society. It's not like you guys are outsiders. But the point is, understand the magnanimous problem this is. We've run out of money. Do you think a small businessman does not like paying their salaries on time? Everybody wants to pay their salaries on time. I'll give you an experience. Yesterday, I just went out and I saw all the shut shops. I had to buy a few things. Do you think I get eternal pleasure as a businessman to see all these shut shops, thousands of people jobless, sitting at home, looking at the skies? Nobody likes that. But we have to face facts. As they said in a famous movie, Houston, we have a problem. Well, we need to tell New Delhi, we have a problem. And it's time to wrap things up now. So I, on behalf of myself and each and every listener and viewer of the Cārvāka podcast, I want to say thanks a lot to Anuraag, who's a regular guest on the podcast, and for our first time guest on the Cārvāka podcast, Mr. Mohandas Pai. Mr. Pai, thanks a lot and enlightening us and sharing your views.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anuraag. Good.
Thanks, Kushal.
All right, guys. Until then, I'll see you next time. Until then, stay healthy, maintain social distancing, and always remember, whenever you see a Babu, tell them, listen to the Cārvāka podcast.